Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation. You know, when the scriptures talk about the spirit of the Antichrist, I mean, that's an easy term to break down. It's an easy term to understand. Anti means you're against whatever the other part of the word is. You're against it. So if you are the Antichrist, you are against Christ. You are against Christianity. You are against Christian values. You are against Christian truth claims. That's what makes you an Antichrist with a little a, not the big Antichrist, not the one that's coming at the end of the age, but somebody who is animated and who is invigorated by the spirit of the Antichrist, somebody who opposes Christ. So that, I believe, is the spirit that is animating and energizing President Barack Obama right now. You know, the other meaning of the Greek word for anti is instead of. So the spirit of the Antichrist, I mean, this is part of how the Antichrist works, is he offers you something instead of Christ as an alternative to Christ. That's also the spirit of the Antichrist. So anyway, I'd like to take your calls. If any of you had a chance to get through the World Vision report back, give us a call, report in. We'd like to chat with you about that or whatever else we've been talking about in this hour. 888-589-8840 is the number to call, 888-589-8840. And do not forget, you know, I'm not the one that was saying today that Barack Obama is the one that is aggressively hostile to Christian civilization. That was the Chief Justice of the Vatican. In other words, and he's speaking for the Pope. He's not going to say what he says without the sign-off, without the approval of the Pope. And remember, the Pope is Times Man of the Year. So I am in agreement, Times Man of the Year, and I agree that Barack Obama is aggressively hostile to Christian civilization, and his Chief Justice is the one who verbalized that for him. Now, let's grab clip number one, 888-589-8840, number to call. Clip number one, this is Cecile Richards. She is the president of Planned Parenthood. I've played I've played sound bites from her before, but she's talking specifically about the Hobby Lobby case today. I want to play this sound bite and then give you the facts. She says we got to be guided by science here. I couldn't agree more. She's the one that's anti-science. Let's listen.
One other point that I think is very important. As a great Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan once said, you're entitled to your own opinions. You're not entitled to your own facts. Every major medical institution confirms that birth control prevents pregnancy from happening in the first place. It does not end pregnancy. And the fact that the CEOs of these corporations wrongly believe that some birth control methods are a form of abortion is just further support for the fact that we're all better off when we leave medical decisions to a woman and her doctor, not her boss or politicians.
All right, so that's Cecile Richards. You're entitled to your own opinion, but not to your own facts. And she's saying, look, you've got people like Hobby Lobby out there saying, look, these contraceptives, some of these contraceptives can cause abortions. And she's saying that's not true. Now, in Hobby Lobby's case, there are 20 contraceptives that you can purchase under their health care plan. 16 of them have no ethical issues connected to them. And Hobby Lobby has no problem with their employees using those kind of contraceptives on their health plan because they do not even run the risk of terminating a human life. But the other four, two versions of the IUD, and then Plan B and the Eladrug that are post-intercourse drugs, they're sort of the morning after or emergency contraception. One of the things they can do is to prevent a fertilized egg. We talked about this yesterday, so I won't belabor it, but they can prevent a fertilized egg from implanting in the uterine lining of the woman, of the mother. So the egg is fertilized, the sperm has united with the egg, so you have a human being at its earliest stage of development. That is a human being. It's got all of its DNA, it's got all of its chromosomes. It is a unique human organism at the moment of fertilization. Now that fertilized egg, as you're aware, travels down the fallopian tubes, gets into the uterus, and then the woman's body, God has designed her body so that the uterus is ready to receive that implanted egg. It implants in the wall of the uterus, and there it grows and becomes a full-grown baby and is born 9 months later. So if you terminate the life of that baby after it has been conceived, but before it has been implanted in the uterine wall, that is an abortion. So the one who is anti-science, the one who is operating out of medical ignorance here is Cecile Richards, the president of Planned Parenthood. You and I are operating with a pro-science point of view. I mentioned these yesterday, but I'll just repeat them. The Harper's Collins Illustrated Medical Dictionary said that an embryo is an organism in the earliest stage of development in man from the time of conception. Now, these are books that are in the Princeton Library as the authoritative sources on all of this. So HarperCollins Illustrated Medical Dictionary, it's an organism from the time of conception, not from the time of implantation, like Cecile Richards wants you to believe, but from the time of conception. Here is Langman's Medical Embryology, the development of a human being. Listen to this. The development of a human being begins with fertilization, not with implantation, but with fertilization. That is medical science. That is biology. And then the government, U.S. government's 1997 National Bioethics Advisory Commission on Cloning Human Beings said this: an embryo is the developing organism from the time of fertilization. So all three of these authoritative medical sources say a human life begins at the moment of fertilization, the moment of conception, not at the moment of implantation. 888-589-8840. Let's go to the phones. Let's grab a call from Mac in Albany, Georgia. Mac, welcome. What's on your mind?
Thank you for taking my call, Brian.
Yes, sir.
I was just thinking, I know you said, talking about the Chick-fil-A guy, he's in the same position, I think, as the World Vision. And do you think that Martin Luther King would appreciate this same-sex marriage?
Well, you know, it's...
Jimmy Carter, the only other Democrat besides Clinton, I consider, would he? I don't think he would, because he's I think a Christian man.
Well, you know, and I don't know about Carter. I think Carter is a big-time proponent of the homosexual agenda.
Well, I'd like to know that. I mean, I have tried to speak up for him to a certain degree, but he would sure be on my S list if I knew that.
Yeah, well, you know, I am not aware that he, you know, I got to plead a certain amount of ignorance on where Jimmy Carter is at on the issue of same-sex marriage.
I don't know for sure, but I was just thinking he seemed like he was real, you know, a Christian fellow.
Well, here's Jimmy Carter from March 21st, 2012, LifeSite News. He supports same-sex marriage. So Jimmy Carter on record as a supporter of same-sex marriage. See if I can get to that story. I just kind of lost it there for a second. See if I can get it back. Jimmy Carter supports same-sex marriage. See if I can grab the story here. Scroll down. Former President Jimmy Carter has been strongly identified as a born-again Christian and as a liberal Democrat for nearly 5 decades. He is once more blending those roles as he promotes his latest book, his own study Bible. During his book tour to promote a study of the scriptures, Carter mentioned he supports same-sex marriage. Here's a quote from Jimmy Carter: "I personally think it is very fine for gay people to be married in civil ceremonies." All right, so I answer your question. Okay, Jimmy Carter is a supporter of same-sex marriage. Now, I don't know that, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. wouldn't have had an opportunity to weigh in on the issue of same-sex marriage because it was inconceivable in 1968 when he was assassinated. Nobody was even thinking about marriage based on the act of sodomy. That wasn't even in anybody's mind. It would just have been unthinkable, literally, at that time in our culture. So he didn't have an opportunity to weigh in on that issue. But I'll tell you one thing about the same-sex marriage issue that would bother him. You know, a lot of the work in the civil rights movement went into getting the franchise for blacks, for black Americans, so that they could vote. You had these Democrats at all these poll taxes and literacy tests and other kinds of things that they'd imposed in the South to keep blacks from voting. White Democrats did that to blacks. They were trying to disenfranchise and keep them from voting. So Martin Luther King went to work to get those restrictions overturned so blacks had the franchise just like white people did in America. Now, a federal judge in Michigan, as you heard yesterday or Friday, overturned the marriage amendment in the state of Michigan. Now, this passed with 69% of the vote in 2004. A very good friend of mine, Gary Glenn, co-authored that amendment, and he led the campaign to get that passed. So 69% or 59%, somewhere in there, of Michigan, I mean, the overwhelming majority either way, voted to protect natural marriage. I don't know if I said this right earlier, but they voted to protect natural marriage in the Michigan State Constitution. Overwhelming majority, including 70% of black voters. 2004, when Michigan elevated protection for natural marriage to its state constitution, 70% of the blacks who went to the polls voted for natural marriage. And this federal judge just disenfranchised them. You talk about disenfranchising black voters. I mean, the NAACP ought to be absolutely outraged. You've got this white judge who has just wiped out the vote of 70% of the African-American voters, the black voters that went to the poll. That's worse than anything that white racists tried to do to the blacks in the South, or as bad. Let me put it that way. It is as bad as anything that white racists tried to do to keep blacks from voting before the Civil Rights Act of 64 and 65. So I know that Martin Luther King would not be happy to see a white judge disenfranchise 70% of black voters. But that's what he did by overturning Michigan's marriage amendment. Focal Point AFR Talk. We'll be back after the news. Stay with us.